straight behind him.
As you've been talking before, I was thinking a lot about what Sonia was saying in the channeling about how, that awesome channeling,
Yep.
about how when we give up, we start giving up some addictions but not feeling through them.
Yep.
And I'm noticing like that feels like what I'm doing in my life. Like I still want them,
Yeah.
and then it just becomes this hopeless feeling.
You feel like you want them, but you're not allowed to have them, but you can't process the emotion of them. And
Yeah.
it's just like,
Yeah. So my question, I guess, is that hopeless yuck feeling, is that another addiction that needs to be processed?
What does hopelessness gain you? It gains you not having to act, not having to do something about it, not having to actually address the actual problem.
Yeah.
Makes you feel... Hopelessness gets you out of dealing with anything, in fact. You can just go, oh, it's all hopeless anyway, I might as well give up. And that's what you want. You want to give up so you don't have to address those issues, you see.
And is it also a bit of like a compensation type feeling, or is it purely
Well, not
an
at that
addiction?
stage, no. It's just all the addiction in play.
Just another
really.
technique of...
Yeah. Just technique after technique. Like I said, we're just weaselly conniving little things, you know. It's like we'll try one thing after another. We will.
Yes.
And up here, you know, we've got to see the sin of that. This is about awakening to the sin, right? So like we had a recent, myself and Mary had a discussion, probably last year sometime, I think it was, about awakening to sin. I can't remember when it was now. But anyway, it was sometime last year, and we had a discussion about awakening to sin. And in that discussion, this is what we're meaning. Like, we need to go through this process where we see the justifications for our sin. We see what we're doing to justify what we do wrong. Right? Now, pain doesn't justify sin. It's up here that does that. The addictions that do that. We can have pain and not justify sin.
I was wondering if you mentioned hopelessness, whether hopelessness can be both an addiction emotion and also a causal emotion.
It can, but it's highly unlikely if you've not accepted your facade that it's a causal emotion. See, what I'm suggesting to you is if the process is, number one, you've got the creation of your pain. And remember, we've been through this process. You've got creation of pain, and then you've got creation of your facade, and then you've got acceptance of your facade, and then you've got deconstruction of your facade, and this process here, these two things, you could call the awakening to sin, right? And then you've got releasing pain. That's the process, right, that we're taking you through. Now, if you're feeling hopeless and you haven't accepted your facade, then your hopelessness is a rage-based hopelessness, an anger-based hopelessness, driven by the desire to not do something. Driven by the desire to not act. And that is in your facade. You follow? So a lot of people are trying to say, oh, I feel real hopeless because of some pain-based thing. But if you haven't accepted your facade and deconstructed your facade, you've got no idea what it is because of. Does that make sense? You're just telling yourself a story that it's that so that you can avoid this. Right? And you've got to be very careful of that. These are self-delusional emotions that we've talked about times before, and you've got to be very careful about using them as justifications and using them saying that I'm actually dealing with some pain when the reality is you're not. Now, sure, in your childhood there are times when you were a young child and no matter what you did, you got punished. They're quite extreme events when no matter what you did, you got punished. So you did a good thing, you got punished, you did a bad thing, you got punished. And that is certainly going to cause a feeling of hopelessness inside of you as a causal emotion. But you're not going to get there yet if you haven't accepted and deconstructed your facade. And so if you're hopeless, feeling hopeless, and you haven't done these two things, then it's hopelessness in the facade. It's not hopelessness in the pain.
So I'm not going to know either way until I come to accept my facade first and then get to the place where I can deconstruct it.
Correct.
Then I will know either way.
Correct. And you'll probably find that both exist.
Okay.
You'll probably find that both exist in the end. But the hopelessness that you choose to have in your facade is all about avoidance.
Okay.
It's all about weaseling out of something. It's all about not taking action. That's a different kind of hopelessness, which is motivated from a different motivation than the hopelessness you feel here. When you feel that, you'll just cry about the fact that when you were a little child and in that situation, you had no choice, and no matter what you did, it was wrong and you got punished for it. That's what you'll be crying here. Very different.
Yeah.
Right? And we tell ourselves all sorts of things. We tell ourselves all sorts of things, and we've got to be real careful. If you haven't gone through the acceptance and deconstruction process, then the hopelessness you're feeling is related to those processes. So very simple.
Basically, at the moment, I just haven't got a clue.
Yeah.
And I just have to be with that and go through the process.
Yeah, and it's okay.
Yeah.
See, if you're not judgmental, that's okay.
Yeah.
Now, if you think about many of the presentations I've given over years now, I've been saying to many of you, you haven't got a clue yet. And you've been going, what does it mean you haven't got a clue? I've been listening for years. Of course I've got a clue, right? I know what he's talking about. And this is why I'm saying you don't have a clue yet, because you've not understood the processes you're going to go through yet, because you're stuck at this one. Stuck there. Yeah. Not going to feel that one, and as a result, you don't know what these emotions are about yet. To know, you've got to accept first that you do what you do, and then find the reasons. So deconstructing the facade is all about finding the reasons why you do what you do. Right? And most of these reasons are driven in this angry phase. So hopelessness, anger-based emotion. Right? Up here it's an anger-based emotion. Here it could be a pain. Later on down the track you might feel it as a pain, but it'll be completely different the way you feel it. Up here you'll feel it like, oh, no matter what I do, it's never going to be any good anyway. Oh, I feel pretty upset about that and angry about that. What's the point of acting anyway? Might as well not act at all. That's all facade. A whole lot of that's, none of it's true. None of it's the truth about your life. It's just how you feel in that moment, justifying inaction. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So in other words, if I can connect with an anger that's behind the hopelessness, then that's an awareness.
Yeah, exactly. That's the emotion you need to feel first. The anger. Oh, I feel really angry that I've got to do something. Like, why do I have to do something? Why do I have to do something? Someone else created my pain. This is what generally we feel. Instead of realising that it's my sin that created it, I go, someone else created my pain and they helped me create my facade. They should have to bloody well do the whole thing themselves and should leave me alone. I shouldn't have to do this. How dare God make me do that? You know, these are feelings in that hopelessness that the hopelessness masks. You follow?
Yeah.
And when you get through those feelings, you feel, there's all my justifications for the hopelessness. Right? And then when you release that, you go, wow, now that I don't feel angry about those things anymore and justified in those things anymore, now I can see that actually I can understand self-responsibility a bit more. I can see, the way God created, it makes sense to me. The way God created things is that I am responsible, and that I am responsible for deconstructing what I believe. And you get to that point. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the key is to not judge yourself for that. See, remember, something that we all must remember is the creation of our facade was a vicious, cruel process, along with the creation of our pain, of course. But the creation of our facade initially began with our parents teaching us. And many times they didn't just teach us by example, they taught us by fist or, slapping or pain to do this. So there's a vicious, cruel process that created my facade. Of course, accepting it is a challenging thing, but I need to stop judging myself for having it so much when it was a vicious, cruel process that created it. You see, it's like, and we need to get to that stage where we're not so judgmental and so critical of ourselves about it, and we just see it for what it is. Yeah. Good question, Chris. Because it helps explain, where we're at. If we haven't got through this yet, we can't be feeling these things. We are feeling these things. Yeah? Our soul is built that way. You can't get to the next thing until you feel the thing on top of it. And that's the way it is. And the key is to come to trust that process. And once you trust that process, everything gets a lot easier. You don't have to use your intellect as much. The feeling is there. You know the feeling of hopelessness, for example, is there. So you know that it's probably a facade-based emotion. What does it give you? What is justification? What drives it as a justification? And you'll feel things like I mentioned, angry that you have to do it when other people created it or helped you create it and things like that. Angry with God for it being there and Him allowing the whole thing to work the way it does and so forth. All these different things that we get angry about in this place. And we just need to let ourselves have it. Let it go, release it. Once we've released it, we realise all sorts of things about self-responsibility, care for self, how important it is to feel emotion. None of those things would be learnt if we didn't go through that process. Yeah. Powerful process.
Thanks.
Yeah.